Okay, I think we should probably start. My name is John Phillips. I'm one of the co-leads. I'm joined by my excellent co-lead, Alina. Alina, please.
Hello, everybody.
So Alina is the real thing. She's a registrar from Spain and a lawyer. I'm more the sort of technical IT kind of person. I know a bit about what we
don't be humble.
Yeah, I know a bit about what we're going to be talking about, and I'm learning a lot as we're using this program. So what I propose to people that have just arrived we're going to do is work through an explanation of the whole project that gives slightly better step process of what we're working on, and then explains the context of the work Alina's doing, that I'm focusing on, and the work that we want to do with prototypes. So that's sort of where I want to get to, and then hopefully we'll have time for discussion and questions. So that's my basic aim. I'm going to share my screen now. Alina, I get a slight echo at the moment still. Not sure why. Do you want to temporarily mute and then?
I will mute.
Thank you. Okay, so this is the Trust Registry project. A couple of opening statements to make. There's the project is run along the lines of the UN CEFACT open development program and various other codes of conduct and ways of working. So there's a code of conduct that we all asked to adhere to, and I suggest that read the text if you like. I won't read out each point, but I would hope that for most of us on this call, nothing that is said there is at all difficult to comply with or to want to do. So I think that should be fine. One thing to call out is that intellectual property policy. The work we do for UN CEFACT is intended to be open standards, royalty free. So any contribution you make to the work that we do is considered to have that quality. And if you have any issues with that, then they need to be raised before effectively the work is provided. That is expanded further on this one, the intellectual property rights, about the development of open standards and specifications. That's what we aim to do in this program and the other programs under UN CEFACT. The project itself, now I won't dwell too long on this slide, but those of you who were with us 2 weeks ago when we first sort of started the project rolling on the kickoff, as we announced the call for participation, that the words Global Trust Registry caused quite a lot of discussion on LinkedIn in particular. And there are various sort of interpretations of what that might mean. And so what we've done here is just to create a few simple what it wills and what it won'ts kind of statements. So these are really just to sort of reassure, I suppose, particularly registrars that are joining or those that are building their own systems and doing their own thing, kind of what we intend to achieve with this project and what we don't intend to achieve. So you'll see there's a very strong message here around enabling registrars and not treading on toes, not telling people what to do, not treading on business models and so on, but basically kind of empowering and intending to make, ultimately, to make trade and supply chains more trustworthy and more transparent. That's the sort of ultimate aim, if you like, of the project. You can think of the work we're doing as having three kind of key types of phases or activities. The first is understanding what exists. So people like Lena obviously know very, very well what happens in her world in the Spanish registrar. And we have others from India joining us that know very well what happens in theirs. And we're keen as a project to take this wisdom as well as other nations into the understanding that we have. So what are people doing? What kind of capabilities do they have? What's access and verification digitally? What digital services they have? That sort of thing is important to understand. And then we have this program of work that Alina started on, which is this define how we might recognize registries. And that's a body of work that starts with sort of requirements and then goes on to the how we might do it. What's the practical implementation of that? You'll see an example of that thinking later in this deck. And the last thing is this implementation guide. If we are able to help registrars take a step up in terms of how they publish the contents of their registries so that they are verifiable data that can be provided by the holder to others, then I think that's the aim of the project. So there's going to be hopefully a couple of pilots that we run out at the end of this project in the second half of this calendar year, which is pretty close to us now. And so really, really simply explain. Now I've been drafting these over the last few days, so please put your hands up or ask me questions as I go along. It's the first time I run through them. And I'm trying to make them as simple as possible, but no simpler. So the simple example I'm going to work on is this idea of somebody in a supply chain who is being propositioned, sold to in a good way by a new supplier who wants them to use their supplies, their products. And the buyer is trying to make a decision about whether they should use this new supplier. So what happens in a normal sort of business sense is that the supplier sends a number of samples, product samples, and a number of documents that sort of say who they are and what standards they comply with, and so on. These sort of are proofs, if you like, that they provide, typically in the current world as PDFs, electronic documents. If they are paper documents, the product itself is probably physical, and this bundle of stuff is what the buyer then needs to understand and decide if it's actually good enough for them to accept as a new supplier. So our buyer wants to verify these claims that they've been made and check to see if they're actually right. Now, if we're going into a kind of a new world way of thinking, there's a project that I've been working on called the United Nations Transparency Protocol, UNTP, and that's provided a framework of verifiable credentials, a way of thinking about the data that is shared and presented so that it's a verifiable container. In fact, they're using a W3C VC standard, so a W3C standard for verifiable credentials, but it sort of doesn't matter what standard they're using. The idea is that the container is cryptographically signed and that the recipient can check to see that it hasn't been tampered with and can confirm who signed it by the fact that it's only this particular key could have been used to actually sign this document. So it's a public-private key, asymmetric key system of verification. So that's the basic idea of the verifiable credential. So we're going to look at two in this particular discussion. We're going to look at this idea of a digital product passport. And I suspect a few of you have already come across digital product passports. Could you put your hands up if you've come across it? Alina, I know you've heard of digital product passports, haven't you? That's a yes from you. Yeah. Has anybody else in the call heard about those? Or should I briefly say what they are? I will explain very briefly then. The European Union, as an example, is mandating, writing into their laws, that products sold into the European Union must have a digital product passport, a digital way of expressing what the product is that complies with the European requirements for a digital product passport. And that's true for all products for the European Union's market by 2030. And it's already true for some. There are some products that are already complying with this model, particularly in the area of sort of EV batteries, electric vehicle batteries. So that's what a digital product passport is. It says a bunch of things about the product. And the other one we're going to talk to is the digital conformance credential. So digital product passport it's issued by the shipper of the goods, the person who's actually made the goods, and is a carrier of product information about the product. So it's got information inside it about the product and typically the manufacturer of the product as well. And the conformity credential is one that says we've been assessed to meet certain requirements or standards, and here's our credential that proves we meet them. It could be quality standards. It could be, if it's in the food industry, it could be to do with organic farming, say. It could be to do with we've used a particular plot of land that's guaranteed to be non-deforested for ingestion again into Europe. A bunch of things could be inside a conformity credential. So this digital product passport is making a number of these claims, and you'll see I've highlighted the idea of a particular cryptographic identifier, this thing called a DID, and the business ID. So the identifier the business declares it to be its identifier, and a whole bunch of other data that's inside it. And it's cryptographically protected, so this buyer can actually test it cryptographically and say, was it signed by the thing it was said to have been signed by? Has it been edited since that point? Is it, in a sense, intact as a piece of information? And then they can extract out the data out of it and make some determinations in that first pass. What they want to know, and we'll see this a bit later, is whether or not the business ID that was declared to be held by this person that sent them this signed package is actually theirs to present. Does the business own this digital ID? So are they who they say they are? Is it valid? So we need to sort of check this thing about, the things that we've presented are nicely protected cryptographically, but is that the business, can they rightfully use this name? Are they registered? So we need an authoritative source for the buyer ID in this DID pairing. So this cryptographic key that's being used to sign things, we need to understand if that business ID and that key kind of belong with each other. At which point we bring in another UNTP credential, which is this idea of the digital identity anchor. So all these are in a standard, you can look them up, but what this project is going to be doing is looking at this particular sort of rough cast of a data schema and come up with recommendations about how it should be modified or changed to what it might need to do to make it work for registries. So think of this as a very penciled in or crayon sort of drawing about what might be inside the digital identity anchor. So the digital identity anchor is issued by an authority, and think of that as a registrar. It maps this business ID to one or more decentralized identifiers. Now, you'll see I've done a little sort of process flow thing in this diagram, and what I'm trying to illustrate is that any registrar of sort of authority inside a country will have a process by which they test to see whether an organization should be registered as a business. Do they meet the requirements of a business in the jurisdiction that they're asking to be registered? So there's a process that exists. It's not this project's business to sort of change that or whatever else. We might want to understand it, but we don't want to sort of change it. It is whatever the country's decided is necessary for them. Once they've gone through these checks, they will typically register the business somewhere in their list of businesses, and they'll give them an identifier typically as well. And the identifiers that are produced are quite often different across each of the registrars. They're the whatever structure they've decided, which is one of the other interesting areas for us to look at. And in the process of all this, there's probably a bunch of information. Now, this fourth thing I've highlighted, and I can get all fancy now with my pointers, turn on laser pointer. This fourth thing here about additional information, including DIDs, that's me casting to the future. The idea being that a registrar might actually recognize the cryptographic keys that the business says they use to sign their stuff. So that's the sort of bit of future casting, right? At the end of all this, they issue this thing called a digital identity anchor, which includes a bunch of information that kind of binds all this stuff together. Who issued it, which authority, and what was the business ID, what are the DIDs that have been registered, and so on. So this is a sort of container that can be used by others to verify the binding between a business ID and the keys that have been used to sign things. Basically, it enables the buyer to verify the supplier business ID and DID are registered by the authority. This is another little drawing of the process that you kind of flow through, where the buyer is checking some things, finds the digital product passport, resolves it is the technical phrase for what they do with the packet of data, finds where the acclaimed authority is, goes to that space, looks up the authority list, finds if the business ID and keys are listed there too. And that's sort of the process you can do with the registrars in the model that we want to promote. So the conformity credential works in a very similar way. It's issued by an independent assessor. Could be a person, could be a company. More often than not, it's going to be a company. The company or the assessor will assess the supplier, check to see they meet whatever the requirements are, and depending if they do or they don't, issue a conformity credential with a number of information points inside it. The assessor, if they're of a notable quality, if they have a license, for example, if this is an important thing that they're assessing, is likely to be registered by an authority as well. That they're likely to have a license. They're likely to have gone through their own process of accreditation to become an assessor in the space. So there's a process typically with an authority where they go through a process of seeing are they a rightful assessor or such things, can they have a license to operate, and they get out of that, they'll get some sort of identifier that says you are assessor number 3 or 4, but not quite so simple as that, more bigger numbers than that. And then they will be given another anchor, if you like, to say, okay, your assessor number is this, these are the things we recognize with you, and so on. Now that particular area here, there is an ongoing UN CEFACT project that is looking at that particular problem. So I won't dwell too far on that. That is something we can expand into, point into. There's some body of work looking at conformity credentials in some detail. So back to our buyer. They're looking at checking and verify the claims made by the supplier and deciding whether to engage with them. And the kind of things we now think they could do are, is the digital product passport credential valid and not revoked? Does the DIA issuer ID match the DIA subject ID? Are the issuer ID on an authority trust anchor? Are the DCCs, the compliance credentials, valid and not revoked? Are they issued by a registered assessor? So all these green ticks are looking pretty good for our new supplier. What we've sort of summarized is that buyers need more than one verifiable supplier, more than verifiable supplier claims. So they can't just trust the supplier they've got to check to see if that supplier actually has other things that support their claims. Now, the question this project's asking, of course, is says who is that a registered authority? So the weakness, if you like, so far in my little walkthrough is that if a fraudulent organization were to create a fraudulent issuer authority and then claim that that issuer authority is given, you can imagine you can kind of create a shadow web, if you like, of claims that sort of support what you're saying, but actually the authority isn't really the authority. So we need a way of telling whether authorities are really authorities, which brings us to authority registers. So this is where I've learned from Alina, and we're sort of working on this sort of understanding. But one of the things that makes an authority is that they are founded in law. There's a country regulation, there's a body of legislature that describes the role of this registrar, what they can and can't do, what they register, how they do things, what they mean, what liabilities and claims and so on can be made against parties in this system, all those sort of things. There's a legal context for the registrar data. And in our particular project, the kind of registrars we're going to be interested in are those that are in sort of the jurisdictions of members of the United Nations, because it's UN CEFACT. In many parts of the world, there may be constitutions of the country, the member state, member nation, that have provinces and states. So Canada has provinces, of course. So Australia has states. So there's the United States. So there could be subdivisions, if you like, inside the jurisdiction that it's a member, each of which may have their own legislative powers. So in the state that I'm in Australia, Victoria, we have our own rights to write laws. And some of those laws are to do with registration of things like land. And some of those things are national kind of registers. So I can register my business in Victoria through a Victorian business registration process, but then it gets added to the National Registry of Businesses for Australia. So there's a sort of need to understand how does the process work inside the jurisdiction, but suffice to say, we understand that not all jurisdictions are just a single legislative body. Some have more complicated structures. Some of them have this sort of a structure where you have some registries, like I just mentioned for Australia, the business registry is assimilated at a national level by a group called ASIC, whereas other things may not be. So, for example, not that it's relevant to supply chains, but birth, death, and marriage registrars are independently run in the states and territories of Australia, and they collaborate to make sure that births don't happen twice. The same birth doesn't get registered by two states at the same time, and that sort of stuff. But they don't actually centralize the data. There's no single repository, if you like, of data about things like births, deaths, and marriages in Australia. When we think about data and jurisdictions, we've got to think about more things than just that. The way that a registry works has a whole bunch of sort of layers around it. So we might think of the data in the middle, and then around that data are things like operations, and then the services that are provided to access and modify and do things with the data. And then there's governance of that whole process. And then finally, we get to the outer layer of they exist within a legal framework, and that gives it sort of meaning. And then to another pattern of many things in many things. And then I actually may stop here and have Alina talk for a bit. The jurisdictions will often have a registrar or registrars that operate with more than one type of data. So in Australia, we have kind of siloed registrars, more or less, but Spain is somewhat different, isn't it, Alina?
Wait a second. Hello, everybody. Yes, actually the Spanish system is not so much different. We have a public register. We have different types. We have a land register on one side, on the other side, business or trade register, and then the asset register, where we currently register, for example, ships, airplanes, and actually in a meeting yesterday, we were even discussing that in the future might be possible to register digital assets. And yes, this on one side, but let me also mention, say a few words about the project. So I think one of the biggest challenges in cross-border trade today is not the absence of identifiers, but the lack of a common, verifiable, and interoperable digital trust framework. I think that many authoritative registers exist around the world, As I mentioned, land, business, asset, products, even I think in Australia you have even livestock register, but they typically rely on PDF or paper certificates that are really difficult or not so easy to verify. The Global Trust Registry addresses these challenges by establishing a UN-hosted globally accessible register of registries, if this sounds well. So this register of registries is actually lists authoritative identifier schemes from around the world who enables any verifier, whether it's a custom official or a bank or a supply chain partner, to confirm whether a credential has been issued by a legitimate source. So as John was mentioning, we are currently working on defining the criteria for national register to be included in this global trust registry and to be recognized as a trusted issuer. Our approach is open and inclusive, but with strong legal safeguards. In my opinion, registers will be, as a land register and also as a lawyer, I think that registers will be eligible as long as they are legally established under the law of their own country, according to their legal frame. They are recognized by the competent national authority, whatever that might be, and the registration they issue produces certain legal effects following a legal formality check of the registered content. In my opinion, this is essential to ensure legal certainty and to uphold the reliability of the global trust ecosystem. I think the registry supports a simplified verification model. Is the credential valid and cryptographically signed? Does the issuer match the entity identified in the registration? And in the third place, is the issuing register listed in a global trust registry as trusted? And I will also make a brief mention to the digital identity anchor, because yesterday some of my colleagues were asking me, yes, but we have many identifiers on market. We have been within the European Union, the European Unique Identifier. On the other hand, we have VLI, which is also another identifier developed by Glaive. So they were asking me, well, then what is the difference between these identifiers that we already have and the digital identity anchor? I think it's an important question to clarify. So the the European Unique Identifier, it allows companies within the European Union to be uniquely identified across borders. Yes, indeed, it is verifiable as well through the BRIS system, but only within the European Union framework, and typically requires direct access to national registers. So this we have to clarify. On the other hand, VLI, the verifiable legal entity identifier, was developed by Glaive and is a globally verifiable cryptographically secured identifier designed for high trust application, but it is bound to Glaive ecosystem, and we also have to consider this. But on the other hand, the identifier we pretend to implement, in contrast, is domain neutral and it is globally extensible. It does not replace these identifiers, as some of my colleagues were asking, and it can even include an European identifier or VLI, but we see it as somehow it wraps them in a standardized verifiable credential format. We can even build, this is one of the questions we were asking ourselves, because we also have within our national system different identifier, and we can even build on them. It does not mean we have to destroy completely our system. So we can use the infrastructure that we already have and build on it. I think this is one of the main benefits. So this gives the digital identity anchor a unique value, in my opinion. It acts as a global trust layer that supports decentralization, cross-border interoperability, and verification. So Together with the Global Trust Registry, the Digital Identity Anchor standard enables the creation of a trusted digital infrastructure altogether for global trade. I think it supports, which is the main target, fraud reduction, efficient compliance, and access to trade finance, especially for emerging economies that need low cost and high insurance mechanisms to provide legitimacy and integrate into national markets. And last but not least, the project is currently delivering a pilot implementation in Spain. We intend to develop a pilot implementation to implement this project. And I also have a question for, I see here we have people from India. Do you intend to participate as well to implement this project in India, or are you considering? It's an interesting question for me. I was wondering if you only intend to participate as experts, or you also had in mind to implement the project like we will do in Spain, pilot project. I don't know if anybody is willing to answer.
Yep, I can hear you.
Actually, we are only participate. We will only participate as an observer and how it is getting implemented or something like that. But not sure about the involvement on the higher perspective. So we have to take some permissions or officials.
I guess we'll continue to encourage you to actively participate. There's sort of three levels probably for this project. One is, as you rightly say, everyone is welcome to observe. That's fine, and that's a good sort of encouragement, I suppose. The other level of participation is to be a contributor to the project, to actually help us write the requirements, the specifications, and so on, the recommendation. To do that, you need to register with your as a UN CEFACT expert, and we can help make that happen. And the third level is probably, as Alina was hoping to encourage you, is to go into a pilot build sort of process. And I'm hopeful. We had a meeting earlier this week with some of the Indian delegates, and it was encouraging. I think that there seemed to be an initiative within India to explore some of these technology opportunities, and we're hopeful that we can include our approach in that experimentation. So we're going to be optimistic and then keep encouraging you to sort of join in if we can.
Hi, John. Am I audible?
Yep, can hear you.
Yeah, I mean, we'll probably have another internal round of discussion and probably have a more refined response for the next meeting as to how we can actually participate.
Fantastic. Okay. These meetings are every 2 weeks. You're very welcome to reach out to Alina or myself in between time if you have any questions, or you're kind of exploring something. Please don't hesitate. You don't have to wait for 2 weeks until you kind of voice them. But yeah, that would be great to have your thoughts for the next meeting, if not before. I've got a couple more slides to go through, and that'll actually help. What Alina said was excellent, and it kind of reinforces what we're going to see in a second as well. So
Satyajit, sorry to interrupt. I think Satyajit Suris also want to contribute.
Yes, thank you very much. It's great to be in this meeting. I missed the previous one. I don't know how I landed into this meeting, but I'm so happy I did. I broadly work in the areas of digital identity and trust frameworks, and I work with UN agencies like UNDP as well as the World Bank. And my broad area of work involves helping governments across various parts of the world in implementing country-scale digital ID systems. And now, as digital ID is moving beyond just an individual or a person ID into broader streams like this, product and business other IDs, that's where my work also goes. So my motive here is to really be a contributor, help in writing specs or help in writing technical documents. I have a technology background, as I always, and also I advise various institutions in building digital ID and trust frameworks. So happy to contribute as things go along, and perhaps also be able to support in any pilot implementation if there's an opportunity. Thank you.
you're in. Well, actually, thank you. That'd be great. And please, yeah, the only thing, if you haven't done already, if you're working with UNDP and others, you may already have this registration process already completed. But there's a very simple form to fill out. What that will trigger is an email. And at the moment, we know that India is looking at, I think they've actually decided that the permanent position held in Geneva will be the temporary head of delegation. It's a role that CEFACT looks to have somebody fill from each country. And that person would then receive the result of filling out the form, and they'd presumably do a check, I suppose, to an extent, and then say, yes, you're in. So what I would say to everybody on this call, if you want to register, tell myself and Alina that you've registered or applied. And if it takes a long time, we can ask the CEFACT Secretariat to help find where it is and maybe accelerate it if it's taking a long time. So if you're applying to participate as an expert, and the links, by the way, are on our project pages and other places, so I can share them in the chat in a second if that helps people. But the basic process is make the application. It should go through. If there's a delay, we can help find out where it is.
Thank you. That helps. I'll do that. Thank you.
So this is a sort of summary of what we're looking for in this project. It's about nation sovereign states. It's about authoritative registers. It's particularly about things to do with supply chains. So as a differentiator, perhaps that digital identity as a human phenomena kind of thinking. We're not actually looking at that part of the problem. Eventually, of course, at some point, who's responsible for a company and other things become interesting. But right now, for this phase of this project, we're only going to be looking at the registry of a business company name, of a plane, as Alina said, or as a parcel of land, that sort of thing. We're not going to be looking yet at the individual natural human person, legal entity that's the owner of this land, or the registered director of the company, or whatever it is. So we're not going to go there. In this phase, it inevitably will become part of the discussions when you start looking further into the legal system of things. So we actually looked at how do registries work right now? And as we all know, I'm sure on this call, we can all call on the power of AI deep research if we wish to use it. And I did that, and I got it to give me the results of what were originally about 25 countries, and then added another 3. So I've got 28 countries data. It's all publicly available information, and the legislature that's published by each country. And what I've produced is this table. Actually, this is a snapshot of a bigger spreadsheet, but and a report. So you can see it's got a number of countries on the left-hand side and a number of sort of columns of information. So this is an example of the kind of thing about trying to learn about what exists. And you can imagine, well, this is really just a research exercise. With the type of registry of registrars we want to have, this would become an electronic form, an accessible, searchable form that lets people find out who is the registrar in Spain for companies, what is their domain, how do I find out more, how can I be certain that this company I've been looking at is actually a Spanish company, where do I find out? So that's the kind of, this is a human readable text format, but you can imagine it's that kind of thing that we want to answer. So even if we get that far in this project, my argument would be we'll have done some good. If you get a directory that is trustworthy of all the registrars that have participated in the world, that's going to be quite a significant value add for trade, in the sense of being assured, if you like, that the particular entity you're looking at has been registered in an authoritative registry. So the other step, the thing with the sort of the next leap, is to make this information a verifiable claim, a kind of cryptographically verifiable thing we'll talk about earlier in the presentation. And yes, we need to look at models of work that already work, like ICAO's passport system, the PKI system that ICAO use, and other sort of low code is another CEFACT registry of information to do with location codes. So there's many examples that work that we need to sort of not ignore. We don't need to create wheels that don't need to be created. So we're going to be looking at how those work and seeing if there's a model we can adopt. And then this, Alina, I don't know if you saw this yet. I was playing with this earlier today. This is my sort of logical model. I was talking to an architect earlier today, by the way, an information architect, and I suggested that my logical models are like drawing with crayons, and the only purpose of them is to try to impart a certain meaning. So the meaning I'm trying to get with here is that we've got a number of trade participants existing that operate across the world in different jurisdictions. So this little blue line you can see is a sort of theoretical trade path of a product that's coming into a car manufacturer in the end, but maybe it's a battery, maybe it's something else. Registered, these entities are registered in their authoritative registrars of each sort of jurisdiction in which they operate. So this registrar here has these particular entities registered, and similarly for these ones and these ones and these ones. And what we're looking for is that these registrars kind of register themselves, subject to meeting certain requirements, inside the UN CEFACT authoritative sort of registry list. And the diagram is trying to show that, you know, the trade flow is this blue line that goes along here. Registration is the sort of green lines here, so that I didn't do the green lines for each one of these 4, but the green line down here implies these are all registered inside this authoritative registrar. And similarly, the registrars have registered themselves, or we've checked with them and registered them in the UN CEFACT body. And the verification process, you can see, is at each step, a participant in the supply chain might want to verify things. They might want to verify just what they see. They might want to go to the authoritative registrar of the jurisdiction from which their supplier claims to be from. And they may want to also check to see that that registrar is actually in the UN CEFACT list. It's that kind of thinking, if you like, that we're pursuing here. So for the project, we've got these sort of 3 bundles of work. One bundle of work is looking at the sort of the identity, a digital identity architect anchor structure, the data structures that we wanted to use. To Alina's point earlier, there are many different formats, and yours, I think Satya did as well. There's many different formats of identifiers already. So how do we make sense of what exists? How do we not create yet another thing? What do we do to make this sort of work? So that's about looking at the data structures. The second thing, and the one that Alina's already working on, is this idea about the governance requirements for the actual UN CEFACT registry itself. You know, what kind of registrars should it be interested in? Are there kind of requirements to be met? You need to have a legal basis, for example, if you remember, that was one of the points that Alina was making. A number of other factors might be necessary. Importantly, though, we don't want to shut the doors to registrars that are around the world. There will be different levels of maturity and digital capability across each of the jurisdictions that the UN is operating in. So we need to understand what exists, respect that, if you like, and recognize that, and try to not shut the door to registrations that are from countries that are still sort of developing capability in digital spaces or other things. That's one of the sort of things to balance inside this governance requirements space. Then, of course, we're working on implementation pilots. So having done this body of work, we're going to try and see, can we actually prove that it works? And that is kind of inside these deliverables. This is the table list of the deliverables you can find for the brief. It looks like this. And if you notice, we're nearly in the middle or towards the second half of June now. And we've got these sort of 3 areas that I described about governance requirements, DIA, digital identity anchor requirements, and these sort of implementation guidelines down here. And you can see we're being quite aggressive. We want to do all this, if we can, before the end of the calendar year. And there's a reason for that, which is that in July of each year, generally, there's a plenary for the UN CEFACT body, and the UN CEFACT body will kind of sign off on recommendations. So one of the outputs of this project will be a recommendation to the UN CEFACT plenary, who then decide whether to endorse it or not, and they need to see it for long enough as countries to sort of determine this. And if they endorse it, then it becomes a recommendation for countries to adopt. And that's the sort of program that we're following. Now, a quick update on where we are and what things are being used. You probably know that we're on a Google Meet right now, and I'm using some Google slides here, and we did some Google stuff at the beginning, Alina and I. And what's going to happen over the next couple of weeks is I'm going to move what we have to the UN CEFACT collaborative UN CEFACT environments, CUE, this thing here. And that's for those of you into technology, it's an Atlassian-based kind of environment, which is fine, another great Australian company. But it's on Atlassian, but it's got kind of curated spaces and other things. And I need to sort of move content in and start setting up. So we're not quite there yet. But the current content that you'll see today, and you can see on the simple project site that we've got, is all inside a Google space. We'll be moving into an Atlassian space. And that's it. So now I'm going to be quiet and let some questions come through if you have them. Well, let me then, while you're thinking of the questions, I will show you. So if you want to participate, I'll paste this on the, so if you're quick over like the next few days or week or something, I probably will leave the site up for a while, but at some point I'll be taking this site down because it'll be superseded by the UN CEFACT sort of space. But this is the simple project website. A good question. I'll get that in a second. And down here, you find there's a contact us, and there's also a link to the registration process. So you can see here there's the link to the registration process. If I click that, I think you'll see that. Yeah, it's just verifying that I'm human. Takes longer to verify that I'm human than you might expect. And then there should be a form that pops up. There you go. So there's a form that you'd fill out if you were applying to become an expert, and that links on this page here. And you can also look for your head of delegations from countries. There's a list of the head of delegations if you wanted to see them individually, and you can reach Selena and I by filling out this form too. So that's that. How can we ensure safeguards against data privacy breaches and cross-border registry access? Okay, so it's a really good question, and there's probably two things to remember about this. One is we're talking about trade, so we're talking about business trade, and to the extent possible, or we're not diving into, as I said before, the sort of personal data space, the personal identifiable information sort of space. Mostly this is to do with companies doing their trade. However, companies become quite sensitive to confidential information about their business. And you can imagine if you're in the middle of a supply chain, you might not want your customers to know who your suppliers are, because you don't necessarily want to be disintermediated. In other words, to be cut out and your customers go straight to your suppliers and cut you out of the deal. So in trade, there are reasons for a careful, managed access to information. But this whole project, the body of work the UN CEFACT is doing, is about transparency at scale. So the idea that led to these projects is that transparency across supply chains serves two very important purposes. One is, from a UN point of view, it helps to support sustainable development goal and anti-greenwashing initiatives. So it makes it difficult for people to make false claims about what they're achieving in terms of environmental benefits and so on. And that's important from the UN's point of view, and probably all of us who believe in a better climate, to prevent that sort of possibility happening. So that requires transparency upstream about what participants are doing and what claims they're making, whether they're verifiable. But the other thing this transparency model works towards is any question about where or what is being traded and where it's come from. So even in an environment where countries are considering tariffs, it becomes very important to understand where things have come from. If you're going to apply tariffs, it's important to understand what they are and where they've come from before you can apply tariffs. So actually this whole idea of transparency at scale and trustworthy data across the supply chain kind of serves many masters. It's not just about greenwashing, but the idea about this data privacy is important, and you'll see in the UNTP space that it's got an idea about selective disclosure. But for us in this project, I would argue that most of what we're looking to make accessible is already publicly accessible. It's just not easy to get to. Satyet, you got your hand up. That's great.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, John. I mean, this is tremendous, and thank you for sharing the participation link. I'm going to send in my form very soon in the next couple of hours before you take down the site. Okay, a couple of questions, and this is in general, where as I've been working, I've been involved in different initiatives, and I'm trying to understand how all these things converge together, right? First, there is this UN ECE work around globally unique identifiers for supply chains. And they are looking at this whole framework around discoverability, resolvability, and verifiability as a way to try to put together on how to create unique identifiers that are globally unique based on zero trust architectures, VLEI, and all that, and how that helps in DRV, right, in general. Then you have these parallel initiatives by sort of pseudo-private one, like the IRA network, which I'm sure you're also part of it, and I'm also one. I'm a member of that, and they're trying to create this separate industry-wide movement and trying to create trust frameworks coming out of an earlier work in the same domain. And then you're very soon at the end of the month, towards early part, you have this global digital collaboration, in Geneva, and I'm sure you're also going to be part of that. If you're there, I hope to see you there too. So lots of things are happening in this whole digital credentialing, digital verification space. I'm just trying to see are we aligning with somebody, or are we trying to, it's a race and we're trying to get there sooner than ahead of others?
My standard's going to be up before your standard. So it's another great question. And yes, you're absolutely right. There are so many initiatives right now around the world, either collectively through government type agencies or quasi-government agencies, or through private endeavor. IRA Foundation being kind of a private individual endeavor, and there's things like the personhood credential initiative that's coming up as well. Each is, I think, trying to solve a particular problem from a certain perspective. And so from our perspective here is that we're from the CEFACT sort of school of thinking. So it's all about trade and commerce and enabling it and setting up an open standard. So CEFACT is the curator of the EDIFACT standard, the low code, and other things that sort of enable commerce at a kind of global scale. So our aim is to provide this royalty-free open standard specification and to encourage people to use it, but we have no kind of axe to grind, no kind of we can't beat people around with a stick or anything. It's up to them to decide if they want to use it. But I think what is novel, I think, about this project that I haven't yet seen the others address is take GLUE. You mentioned the Global Legal Unique Identifier project. If that succeeds, and in a sense, I hope it does, there's no reason why we couldn't include that in the process that we're describing here. We could recognize, as Alina said earlier, we could recognize GLIFE, LEIs, and VLIs. Why not register not just a DID, but also register these other things? What we're really trying to do is to get registrars able to kind of issue the things they choose to register in a way that makes them verifiable. And I think that's the empowerment thing we're doing. It's sort of going straight to the registrar. We're not. I couldn't say no. I don't yet know of other projects that are trying to do that specific part of the puzzle, and that's what we're about.
Excellent. No, that really clears some confusion. But great, thank you.
Right, Alina, do you want to say anything before we wrap up?
Yes, coming back to the question that's I don't know, somebody was asking. Oh yes, exactly, about data privacy. I would like to clarify a couple of things. Also, my colleagues were asking at the beginning when they saw the project, or are we?
Oh, Alina, you've gone quiet. You're back. You're back now. You're on mute, though, I think, at the moment. Oh, no. Can't hear you. Damn. I think it's not coming through. I don't know why. While you're checking that out, and we'll hold for a minute or two. So quickly on sort of admin stuff, we try to make these meetings 50 minutes long, so you get time to get to your next meeting, which might be at the start of the hour. And so we will try and finish before the top of the hour, so you do have a few minutes before whatever your next thing is. Also, what I want to do for the next meeting in 2 weeks' time is to have a kind of plan of work to work through. So in other words, we'll be looking at the documents we're producing. We're going to kind of shift gears into an actual do work kind of review work. Where are we at? What are we producing kind of model? And that will hopefully kind of start driving us towards a much more collaborative and review creative sort of process. Now, can we? You've been in and out. Can you hear? Oh, that's encouraging.
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, great. Yes, referring to data privacy, I would like to clarify, because of my colleagues were also asking in the beginning when they first saw the project, if we aim to create like a huge database that grants access to sensitive or private data. And I said no, because they got confused when they saw global registry, that they thought, oh, we might grant access to our database, and this we don't want. Of course, nobody wants this. And just wanted to clarify that the Global Trust Registry, in any case, does not store or expose any personal sensitive data. It only lists trust registers and their metadata, such as jurisdiction, type of register, and other, but does not grant access to private information cross borders. So I think this is an important issue that wanted to clarify.
Absolutely. That's excellent.
So no concern about this.
Okay, well, I'm gonna suggest it's the top of 5 minutes to go, top of the hour. Thank you all very much. We'll take the transcript from the meeting, create the minutes, and make those accessible. Please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or Alina and the project itself for questions. And yes, please do fill out those forms to become contributors with us.
Thank you very much. It was indeed tremendous, great opportunity to be here. I look forward to continuing.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.
See you.